I know this world is constantly rushing, full of noise, obligations, and expectations. And you probably have 100 reasons to click away from this video. So, if you're still here, even for a few seconds, thank you. I tell this story not as someone seeking sympathy, but as someone who was silent for far too long. I rewrite this story with the patience of a person who was forgotten, who just wants to set one thing straight before turning the page. I don't need you to feel sorry for me. I just hope you'll see a piece of yourself in what I'm about to say. And if you do, maybe leave a gentle sign, a small touch on the like button, so I know someone out there understands. It was my birthday, my 27th. The kind of milestone where people either get engaged or finally move out of the apartment with the broken radiator. Me? I just wanted to survive the family party. It was held in the backyard of my late grandfather's estate, now technically owned by my mother. Long tables with crisp white linen, fake laughter, champagne and flutes that no one really liked but drank anyway. A garden filled with blooming hydrangeas that Ivy had chosen as if their color made up for everything they erased. Cousins flew in from Colorado. An aunt I hadn't seen since high school hugged me too tight and asked if I was still freelancing. I said yes. She said, "Still figuring it out, huh?" I smiled. Then came the toast. Mom stood near the patio steps, wine glass lifted like a dagger wrapped in crystal. "Here's to Ivy, our golden girl, for starting her own design studio," she beamed. Applause erupted. "And of course," she added, her tone now dipped in syrupy steel, "to the one who always held us together quietly in the background. Happy birthday, love." I didn't move. I didn't smile. I watched as Ivy, the crack didn't split me open. Not yet. It just sat there, quiet, invisible, like a hairline fracture in glass no one notices until it shatters. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no podcast. Just the hum of the engine and the words looping in my head. She needed it more. Ivy had always needed more. More time, more attention, more space to figure things out. And somehow, she always got it. I remember being 12. Grandpa came to my middle school science fair, the only family member who did. I'd built a solar-powered water purifier from scratch, and I was so proud. But when he bent to take a photo, Mom called. Ivy had a migraine. He left before they handed out the ribbons. I won first place. No one ever knew. Another time, I painted a portrait of him for his birthday. Charcoal on linen paper. Mom took one look and said, "He looks tired. Maybe don't show him that. You know how sensitive he is about aging." She wrapped it in tissue and tucked it into a drawer. Gave Ivy's handmade candle instead. Every year, my gifts were recycled. My wins were quiet. And Ivy's struggles were paraded like victories. When she failed calculus in college, Dad paid for a private tutor. When I passed statistics with an A, they forgot to ask. She totaled her car at 21 and got a new one. When I asked for help replacing my laptop, Mom said, "You're resourceful. You'll figure it out." Even Grandpa, the one I trusted, started sending fewer letters after I moved out. At first, I blamed college, life, time zones. Then the letters stopped completely. But Ivy? She always had fresh envelopes in her room. Cream-colored, his handwriting neat across the front. And when I didn't go back to the estate after that, the thank you brunch they hosted for Ivy, I declined. The gallery opening she held using Grandpa's name, I wasn't invited, and I didn't ask. But sometimes, I'd catch myself rereading old texts from Grandpa, the few I had saved. They stopped abruptly, 2 years before he passed. No goodbye, no change in tone, just silence. At first, I thought maybe he'd grown distant. Maybe the illness they whispered about had come on sooner than they admitted. But it didn't sit right. The last message I ever got from him read, "Still proud of you. Keep going, kid. And then nothing. I told myself he was tired, that maybe Ivy needed him more. But even that excuse was starting to fray. Then something strange happened. I was at the grocery store, of all places, standing in line, half asleep, holding a dented box of granola bars. The woman behind me, older, delicate hands, kind voice, tapped my shoulder. "You're Walter's granddaughter, aren't you?" I turned, startled. "Yes?" She smiled. "I used to help clean the estate years ago, before he got sick." I blinked. "Oh." She studied me for a moment, then leaned in just enough to whisper. "He used to leave envelopes for you. By the front door." Every month, my stomach tightened. "What kind of envelopes?" "Letters. Sometimes little books. Always said not to forget." She tilted her head. "I wondered why you never came to pick them up." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The rest of the day passed in a fog. Envelopes? Letters? I never saw them. No one ever said a word. That night, I tore through every drawer in my apartment, every notebook, every box, every file, just in case I had missed something. Nothing. I even messaged Ivy. It happened on a Tuesday. Rain-soaked, slow-moving, the kind of day where the sky forgets it's morning. I was clearing out an old storage box, not because I wanted to, but because my landlord finally gave me notice. Rent's going up. I'd have to leave by the end of the month. Beneath a tangle of old receipts and expired notebooks, I found it. A dusty hardback copy of Gulliver's Travels. The one Grandpa gave me on my 15th birthday. I hadn't opened it in years. The corners were curled, the leather worn thin. But as I flipped through the pages, something fell out. A small brown envelope. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, in his handwriting. I froze. Inside was a USB drive and a single note. "If you're reading this, they've already rewritten the ending." My hands shook as I plugged it into my laptop. The screen flickered, then static. And then his voice. Raspy, slower than I remembered, but unmistakably his. "Hi, kid." He chuckled softly, the sound catching in his throat. "If this reaches you, then something's gone wrong. And I'm sorry. I tried. God knows I tried." He paused. I could hear him shift in his chair, the creak of old wood beneath his weight. "I knew they'd try to take it all." "Ivy? Well, she's always been complicated. But it's your mother I never expected to turn so cold. You were meant to have the foundation, the patents, the journals. Not because of blood, but because of belief. You believed in the work. In me." I bit down on my lip. The tears were close now, but I didn't blink. "They kept you out. I started to see it near the end. Letters not getting through. Phone calls that mysteriously never reached you. When you stopped answering, I assumed you'd moved on. I didn't know they'd changed your number. So I left this, with the lawyer, with instructions. But if you're hearing it from this file, then something's gone sideways. And that means you have to fight for what was already yours." Silence. Then softly. "They will tell you it's for your own good. They will smile and say it's what's fair. But sweetheart, you know better. You always have. This isn't about revenge. It's about remember." The tires crunched over the gravel driveway like an old memory. Same sound. Different woman behind the wheel. I parked behind a black Range Rover. Ivy's. Of course, still flaunting money she hadn't earned. The estate loomed in front of me. White columns, manicured hedges, a glass sunroom Ivy had once called her creative sanctuary. But to me, it had always been Grandpa's house. The one with the attic full of broken inventions and notebooks that smelled like graphite and lavender soap. Now, it felt like a crime scene. I didn't knock. Just opened the front door. It was still technically family property, wasn't it? The sound of laughter floated from the dining room. I stepped inside, my boots leaving tiny imprints on the Persian rug. Ivy's voice, sharp, high, too loud. Mom's, soft and performative, always sweet when company was near. When I entered, they froze. Ivy's hand tightened around her mimosa. Mom straightened her posture like I'd just brought in a health inspector. Even the lawyer, Mr. Devlin, looked momentarily startled. He stood by the fireplace, a leather folder under his arm. "Darling," Mom began, forced smile cracking at the edges. "I didn't know you were coming." I looked at her, then at Ivy, then slowly reached into my coat pocket and placed the USB drive on the mahogany table. "I'm not here for brunch," I said. "Play it." Devlin's brow furrowed. "What is this?" "Grandpa's voice," I said, "and a copy of his actual will." Ivy scoffed. "This is absurd. This is harassment." But Devlin plugged in the drive, and then silence. Then his voice. Again, that low, worn-out rasp. "If you're hearing this from her hands, it means my instructions were ignored." It played like thunder in that glassy, curated room. Mom's face turned pale. Ivy's nails clicked against her glass, her grip unsteady. Devlin listened, and with every word, his eyes narrowed. When it ended, he didn't look at them. He looked at me and said, "There's more." From his folder, he pulled out a sealed manila envelope, stamped with Grandpa's initials. Inside, the handwritten will, dated 2 weeks before his final stroke. Clear, unambiguous. Everything, the patents, the trust, the foundation. To me, Ivy was only mentioned once. She will find her own way, as she always insisted. And Mom? Not at all. The room felt frozen in time, as if even the house was holding its breath. Devlin cleared his throat. "I'm obligated to honor this document. It supersedes the previous version." Ivy exploded. Number, this isn't happening. She doesn't even want it. She's a freelancer, for God's sake." Mom stood. "I did what was best for the family. Walter was confused at the end. He trusted too easily." I cut her off. "He trusted you," I said. "That was his mistake." Then I turned to Devlin. "What happens now?" He straightened. "You inherit the entire estate, effective immediately." I nodded once, and for the first time, I didn't feel erased. I felt undeniable. No one spoke. Not for a long time. The will sat between us like a live wire. Crackling, unseen, but dangerous. Ivy paced. Her heels struck the marble like drumbeats. "This is insane," she whispered. "It's a mistake. It has to be." Mom didn't speak. She just looked at the letter, the one written in Grandpa's unmistakable hand, and slowly crumpled her napkin. Small movements, always controlled. "I don't need any of this," I said quietly. "But I deserve it." My voice didn't shake, and that shocked me. Devlin offered to explain next steps, but I waved him off. I didn't want logistics right now. I wanted to see them, see if any of it registered. Ivy finally stopped pacing. Her face was red, streaked with tears that came more from rage than pain. She stared at me like I'd stolen something, and maybe I had, but only what was already mine. "You never cared about his work," she spat. "You barely visited." "I was there every weekend?" I smiled, software sad. "You were there to perform. I was there to listen." I let the words hang. I didn't need a spotlight to love him. Mom exhaled sharply. "Oh, please, you're rewriting history now." She stepped closer, her voice growing cold. "Your grandfather was a brilliant man, but he got confused. That recording? Probably made in one of his bad spells. He didn't know what he was saying." I turned to her, and for the first time in my life, I looked her directly in the eye. Not as a daughter, but as a mirror, reflecting every silence, every dismissal, every time she told me to be reasonable while Ivy spiraled. "He knew exactly what he was saying," I said, "because he saw what you were doing." Mom's mouth opened, then closed, and in that moment, I saw her. Really saw her. Not as a mother, but as a woman who had spent her whole life crafting an illusion. And when the light shifted, the days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't hum with peace, but with shockwaves still echoing beneath the surface. I expected them to call, to demand, to fight, but they didn't. Instead, I got emails, curtain, terse, from Ivy. "This isn't over," from Mom. "You've humiliated us, after everything we did for you." I didn't respond, but one message did come from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My cousin, Grace. She wrote, "I saw what happened. I always knew something was off. They treated you like furniture. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner." That one, I cried for. Because it was the first time someone acknowledged I hadn't imagined it. The confrontation didn't end in a courtroom. It didn't need to. It ended at the kitchen table of the estate. I returned a week later just to retrieve a few things. Maria had laid them out. Grandpa's science journals, an old telescope lens, my childhood notebook, the one with the sketch of Saturn we made together. As I packed them, I heard footsteps. Mom, standing in the doorway, no makeup, no mask. "You could have just asked," she said. Her voice was low, heavy. I zipped the bag. "I did, my whole life." She leaned against the wall, her arms folded, but not like armor, more like someone trying to hold themselves together. "I wanted you to be strong," she said. "Not needy like Ivy." I looked at her, not angry, just tired. "Needing love isn't weakness." She didn't reply. I stepped past her, pausing just once. "You don't have to apologize, just don't rewrite the story, not this time." I left her. I didn't throw a party, didn't post anything online, didn't announce the inheritance. Because this wasn't about possession. It was about permission. To finally exist on my own terms. I sold the cottage in Maine. Not out of anger, but because it held too many ghosts. I donated the antique furniture Ivy had once claimed. I kept only what mattered, the telescope, the notebooks, the worn chair he used to read in. Then I did something no one expected. I took the money and built something from it, a science center. In the same town where Grandpa used to live. Not fancy, not sleek, but real, accessible, free for public schools. We called it the Ashby Lab for Wonder. I hung my first ever science fair photo by the front desk. Me at age 12, crooked smile, crooked glasses, standing next to a cardboard solar purifier, the one Grandpa missed seeing. But now, it saw me every day. We filled the place with kids, messy ones, loud ones, quiet ones who didn't raise their hands because they'd been taught their curiosity was too much. I told them, "You don't need permission to be brilliant," and their eyes lit up like comets. The notebooks he left behind? I digitized them, created a program where students could build real projects based on his sketches. Legacy wasn't just a vault of things, it was motion. It was transmission. Every week, I sat with one student who reminded me of me. The quiet ones. The steady ones. The ones whose strength was misread as distance. I told them the story, not the bitter version. Healing didn't come in a single wave. It came slowly, in pieces. In the way I brewed coffee without checking my phone. In the way I stopped flinching when I heard Ivy's name. In the way I no longer needed to justify why I walked away. Some nights, I'd sit by the window in my apartment. Not the old one with the broken radiator, but a new one, quiet, with tall windows and warm wooden floors. I'd read Grandpa's notes, margins filled with his messy scrawl. "Remember, math is just poetry with rules. Don't let them talk you out of your own eyes." I'd underline those lines. Not to remember him, but to remember myself. I no longer asked, why didn't they love me more? Because I had finally answered the more important question. Why did I keep asking them to? Forgiveness came in fragments. Not for them, but for me. For the girl who kept showing up to a closed door. For the woman who believed silence meant strength. For the daughter who thought love was earned by not needing it. One morning, a package arrived at the lab. No return address. Inside was a small velvet pouch and a note in shaky handwriting. It was from Maria. The pouch held a key. The note read, "Found this while cleaning the upstairs study." He must have hidden it well. "It's for the lake house." I hadn't known it still existed. I took a weekend off, my first since the lab opened, and drove north. The lake hadn't changed, still ringed with pines, still quiet like a held breath, still untouched by the noise of family parties or rewritten wills. Inside, the furniture was covered in white sheets. Dust danced in the air like memory. In the back room, on a desk facing the window, was a photo. Me and Grandpa, laughing, covered in flour from a failed cookie experiment. Below it, carved into the wood of the desk. For her. Always. I didn't cry. I just sat there, hands resting on the table, and let the silence wrap around me. Not like an absence, but like an answer. Morning came soft. Gentle light filtered through the pine trees, casting golden ripples across the lake's surface. Birdsong echoed in the distance. Not loud, just enough to let you know the world was still turning. I sat on the dock, legs tucked under a blanket, sipping coffee from Grandpa's chipped enamel mug. The same one we used during our early morning stargazing trips. It still smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt toast. The lab was a few hours away, but my mind wasn't there. Not yet. I thought about everything that had been taken, everything that had been returned, and everything I had chosen to leave behind. The anger had dissolved somewhere along the way, not because it wasn't real, but because it had done its job. It woke me up, then stepped aside. The truth had never been that I wasn't good enough. It was that I was never meant to shrink myself for people afraid of my quiet power. I had been the still one, the steady one, the one who didn't ask. But stillness doesn't mean absence, and silence is not weakness. Now, I owned the house where I had once been forgotten. Now, I taught kids to speak up through code, circuitry, and curiosity. Now, I breathed fully. The breeze picked up, sending tiny waves skimming the dock. I wrapped the blanket tighter and looked up at the sky. Cloudless, open, wide. If Grandpa were here, he'd probably say something like, "Some people are roots, others are weights. Know the difference?" He never did like melodrama. He just liked